this is real, not, the ups and downs of social media. And that'll really help just kind of calm my mind down. The more I can even use those experiences sometimes when I'm struggling as inspiration for videos, it kind of turns it around a little bit. There's just always going to be a small group of people that don't like what you're doing. And you can waste too much time trying to appeal to those people and not move forward.
Coping with life experiences through comedy and creativity is a powerful approach that can transform challenges into sources of inspiration. Today, we're joined by Aditya Sunny Sundaresan, an Army veteran, entrepreneur, and content creator. Post-service, he founded Zuvier, an adventure travel fashion brand, in addition to becoming a TikTok sensation with over 4 million views. Sunny, I'm so honored to have you join us here on the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on. Flattered that you reached out to me and want to talk to me.
Absolutely. I mean, we saw you on some other podcasts that we follow along with, got to learn a little bit about your story. And as our listeners begin to track their walk with the Strava app, I'd love to just jump right in. The military community is known for our use of humor in dealing with dark situations and difficult times. How did you end up using humor as a coping mechanism or tool for your mental well-being, both while you were in the service and in your current endeavors?
Yeah, so I think I'd always kind of had my humor, for those that don't know, is, I think I would describe it as sarcastic, kind of dry, almost observational. And I think I've been kind of doing that my whole life, just dealing with people. My dad's is kind of a sarcastic guy as well. I watched a lot of British comedy growing up because he's from India, and that's just, when he was growing up, they were just all watching British film, and British comedy is very dry and sarcastic. And then when I joined the military, I kind of found a similar sense of humor with a lot of people. And of course, you just get all sorts of, details, crazy tasks, whatever. Sometimes they suck. A lot of the times they suck, and you're kind of joking about it. And I would really say the style of humor that my videos are known for really came from my deployment, where we were this isn't like a going after people's heads type of thing, but there was a lot of leaders on our deployment that I didn't think were the best. And me and my platoon sergeant he was really funny. I credit his style of humor to my videos, and we would not do skits, but we would almost make up characters based on the kind of just terrible leaders we had. So a lot of the skit ideas were born out of my deployment, and just the kind of, it felt like we were in a TV show sometimes, just dealing with the people. So, and that really just helped cope with, ridiculous things that I'm sure anyone in the military can relate to, being assigned to do that sometimes doesn't make sense. Most of the time doesn't make sense. And I'd use that. And then after I got out, just dealing with the transition of getting out, dealing with how people perceive veterans and stuff, humor seemed like a good way to deal with that instead of being, bitter or angry, or, which is the other option, I suppose.
Yeah. So now correct me if I'm wrong, but you went into the Army as an officer. So you were a platoon commander for that deployment then, yeah?
Yeah. Platoon leader, which someone will maybe notice the distinction. I didn't have, for those that care, I didn't have command authority as a lieutenant, which in the Marines they do. So platoon leader, but overall, yeah, same thing.
Gotcha. Well, what inspired you to take that route in the first place? Because it's kind of a bit of a journey from where you're ending up right now.
Yeah, and it was a journey from how I grew up. So my dad is a scientist. He knew he wanted to be a scientist since he was a kid, and he was lucky that way, I suppose, that he just found his thing early on. And so growing up with my dad, I thought, okay, I'm going to be a scientist too. And I think I was about 19 or 20, like end of my junior year of college, where I kind of took a hard look at where I was going. And I just, I was studying physics, idea to be a physicist. And, the people that I was with were reading like physics textbooks to go to sleep, like they were in that world. And I was like, that's not who I am. And so I kind of had an existential crisis, I guess. I I felt pretty old at 19 or 20. It's funny to kind of look back on that now and realize like I had still have my whole life ahead of me, but I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm about to graduate in a year. I don't think I want to do this anymore. And I just started reading a bunch of books. I just stumbled across some books. There was a guy in the CIA, there was a guy in the Marines. I don't know how I found these books, you know. I just stumbled across these books and I was just reading about these people's stories, and it just opened my eyes to I was so in the science world that I, was tunnel visioned unto like, well, this is the only job I can do. And the life that these people were living just seemed so epic, and, it seemed like an adventure. And there wasn't a lot of logical reason behind it other than I was young and I thought this just seems so outside of what I would normally do that I almost have to do it. And then because I was getting my degree, I figured the officer program would be the way to go. Applied to officer candidate school. Actually got rejected the first time. I've never said that before, which is funny to think. They told me I wouldn't be able to hang with the other officers. And then I applied again and got in. So for anyone out there, it's, and I ended up doing the thing. So, but that was kind of my journey. There was no real logical, like, oh, if I join the Army officer program, I'm going to get opportunities down the line or anything. I was just like, this just seems really cool. So, and this was 2016 when the 82nd, and I think there were some Marines too, but the 82nd Airborne was fighting ISIS in Mosul. So that was all over the news. And I just thought, I want to be part of something real like that.
That is quite a turn from, this very logical, we're going to test the theories, to being inspired by stories of people's journeys in the military. I mean, I myself knew that I was joining ever since the 8th grade because my older brother asked me. So it was just kind of, that's what I was going to do. We didn't know that there was going to be a war when kicked off when I decided to sign up. So what do you think it was about those stories and like that different life that you experienced growing up that really drove you to want to try something new and exciting? Because right now you tell stories, but it feels like the stories were what inspired you to begin with.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I grew up in a smallish town, college town, called Davis, California. Shout out Davis, California. We're the bike capital of the United States. Kind of a nerdy, nerdy claim to fame there. But within about 10, 15 minutes of taking your bicycle, everyone had a bicycle growing up. That was just a bunch of nerds. But you could take your bike and just be in the fields, be by a river. And so I spent a lot of time as a kid just going out with my friends. We'd take airsoft guns. We'd try to make bows out of trees. And so that's the stuff I would get really passionate about doing without anyone telling me to do it. And, I was in the Boy Scouts as well. My parents didn't force me to go or anything like that. I just had some friends at school talking about some coyotes. I still remember this. They were talking about some coyotes that were near their tent. And I was like, I want to do that. And so whereas I think a lot of kids, their parents put them in Boy Scouts, I was like, I want to be part of that. So I think I've always kind of wanted to be part of adventures like that. And when I saw these stories in these books, it kind of reminded me of the things I really enjoyed doing. And I think a lot of these stories too that I read, especially One Bullet Away by Nathaniel Fick, who's a recon Marine. He had kind of a similar journey to joining the Marines where it was pre 9/11, but he kind of felt lost junior year. And he heard a Marine talk at a school and he was just suddenly inspired. So I think I saw a lot of myself in a lot of the stories I read. And then they all talked about how their military experience changed them for the better. And I think it was just a combination of all those. And I just thought, screw it, I'll try it out.
What were some of the things that stood out to you when you were first coming in? I know that Alaska wasn't necessarily your favorite place, and deployments are also hard. And you had kind of mentioned a lot of your humor came from observing things that could probably be improved upon from the top down. So we pick at those. But what were some of those things that really stood out to you and caused you to eventually move forward?
So I'll say this up front that I don't regret any of my experience at all, even though I got out for, I wanted to do other things in my life, but I thought the experience was, it's weird. I don't know if I was objectively happy throughout most of it. It's funny to think about. Like I was probably miserable most of the time, just, being in the field, complaining, whatever. But I'm glad I did it. And I'm even glad I got stationed in Alaska, which I, probably I couldn't have told you where Alaska was. I knew it was somewhere, super far north. But I think it was just such a different lifestyle than anything I'd ever experienced, because I didn't know any military families growing up. I didn't have any military friends. And, all of a sudden you're waking up at 5 o'clock to go do PT. You have to make sure you're tucking in your shirt while you're running. I mean, it's all these like strange like things that it's kind of funny to look back on that you did that. I think for me, to stay in, I would have either tried out for special operations, which I never did. I never tried out the Ranger School, but I never, tried to be in Ranger Regiment or anything. That would have maybe been what I would have done if I'd stayed in, but I'd kind of rediscovered making videos in the Army. I'd made videos as a kid just for fun, like little films with my friends. And I kind of started making them again in Alaska because there was nothing to do, and the outdoor scenery there was so epic. And we'd go on just glacier hikes, take snowmobiles, stuff like that. And so I kind of rediscovered a lot of the things that I found inspiring, and it just felt like there was nothing left for me personally in the Army that I wanted to do. I didn't feel like I had to prove anything to anybody. And then I think the leadership part probably affected it a little bit, just seeing some of the people that were promoted or in charge, and they weren't the best. Not to say that everyone in a leadership position in the military was bad, but of course you do see people that maybe shouldn't be in the positions they're in. So I was kind of over, especially after the deployment. I just thought, okay, I want to do other things, and that kind of led me to business school.
Yeah, the military can definitely kind of have that challenge where you have to be fully bought in, or else the discrepancies will stand out and start to tarnish some of our experiences, to include our transition back into civilian life. Like either you're bought into the way the military does it, or you're hypercritical of it. And then there's also people that manage to just go, okay, this was my expectation that I was always going to get out, not 100% bought in, but I'm ready to move on to the next thing. So how did you start to begin your transition back into the civilian life and into becoming a creator and entrepreneur?
Yeah. So business school is kind of a classic stereotypical officer thing to do, just because you don't really need any real technical skills to get in. It's not like medical school or law school. And an older lieutenant, so a guy he actually went to law school, but he kind of gave me some advice like, hey, you still have your GI Bill, your post 9/11 GI Bill, because I did officer candidate school. So the Army didn't pay for my undergraduate. And I kind of knew I wanted to do something with videos. I kind of knew I wanted to do something with clothing, maybe. I didn't really have a clear plan. And this 2-year business school program, which I graduated last year, seemed like, if I'm being honest, probably just a procrastination to facing real life. So I figured, hey, if a lot of other veterans are doing this thing, I'll do it too. I want to do something business related. So it seemed like the right choice. And the transition wasn't bad at all going to business school, because there was a veterans club in New York. I went to NYU in New York City, and New York itself has a good veteran network. And NYU had a really, really strong veterans club, like military veterans club. So you're with people going through the same thing. So I didn't think the transition was difficult then, just getting out of the military and going straight to that, because now you're around people who experience the same thing. They're like, yeah, screw the Army. You go through a little bit of that, when you get out, like, I'm out, I'm free, I'm a free man now. I think the transition didn't really hit actually till I got out of business school, which sounds strange maybe to say, but that's when I lost like the social group of business school. And like this past year has been kind of tough that way, where it's like, okay, my whole life I've had like a social group, whether it was school, the military, business school. Now it's like, oh, I have to like go out and make friends, like there's no network of people that are just going to like that are just around you constantly. But if anything, the challenges of experiencing that have been at least helpful in giving me ideas for content to make, because I made a lot of content about just being a veteran and just some of the interesting experiences, whether it's talking to civilians or even other veterans, and kind of the weird, it's like, where do I fit in socially? So hopefully that kind of a long-winded way of answering your question, but hopefully that gives a idea.
No, absolutely. I mean, the community aspect is so hard, and it's funny that you mentioned like you didn't start feeling like the transition became difficult until after you were done getting your master's, like after the education side was done. Because I can definitely relate to that. Like I got out, I was enlisted, didn't have a degree, decided, okay, like what am I supposed to do? Get a bachelor's. Okay, now I have my school that I'm a part of. It was a very small school. I was a veteran that was avoiding other veterans primarily. And then, I found the job. And I found out like you can do art for a living and within the government. And I was like, oh, wow, you can actually do this and make a good living. So let me get my master's. And so now like I'm focused on something else. But as soon as that focus and like those goals were being achieved and met, I still found myself struggling for a couple of years. And being a content creator, it can feel very, very lonely, even when we're trying to relate to our audience that we're speaking to, or even when they're being supportive, because like that editing bay is tiring. The brainstorming is exhausting. So how do you currently find your balance in collecting the humor, the lightheartedness, and also like the seriousness of the challenges that you're currently facing?
So I still don't think I have it totally figured out. But I found that if I don't, it's really when I stop making the videos, like I've taken a few breaks sometimes where I'll take a few weeks off, I'm not feeling the videos very much, or sales aren't doing very well. And, I'm just kind of in my own head. That's really when it's worse. And the more I can even use those experiences sometimes when I'm struggling as inspiration for videos, it kind of turns it around a little bit. And the best I can, I try to find like-minded people. It's pretty tough because everyone's kind of doing their own thing on the outside, which is probably normal to really just everybody. But, when you come from I didn't have a full-time job after I'd worked part-time jobs, but military was really my first real job. So, and it's a very social job. I was in the infantry. So you're just around people 24/7. And so to answer your question, I don't know if I have it totally figured out, but I think being aware of it has been really helpful, because it's when I wasn't aware of what was causing me to feel like this, where, I would make a video. The big thing with content creation is you want a video with a lot of views, right? And I've made videos now that have gotten over a dozen, at least several dozen that have gotten over 1 million views. And I'll tell you, you don't feel any better after. There's like an initial spike where you feel really good. Then the next day you're like, yep, I'm still alone. So, because you don't have it, especially when you're doing it alone, you don't have a team. Where I felt better sometimes, even after a terrible field problem, where we're like, what's the point of that? But then you're like, let's go to the bar and just, Friday night, we're done with the field. So I don't have it figured out yet, but I think being aware of it has really helped, because it means I can do things that are going to try to solve that, which for a large part of what I do is just making fun of it, which helps.
Yeah, I mean that dopamine hit is real, whether it's coming from the attaboys at a professional job, right? Promotions or awards or whatever it is. It'll only get you so far. And like the crazy part that we know with social media and putting out our podcasts is we can get likes, we can get views, we can get positive comments, but then there's also the negative comments, or like the dreaded silence. Yeah. Like it just did not land. It didn't spark any kind of conversation. And like that drops my ego almost in an instant. And I'm like, I'm back at square zero. Like this isn't helping anybody. So like, I know some of the things that I do is I draw on the personal experiences of the community that we're building with 1 Mile One Veteran and the people that reach out to us individually over the comments. So like that's one of our strategies that we do to kind of manage the dopamine roller coaster. Is there anything that you do to kind of manage your ups and downs?
Yes, actually, I was thinking. I discovered this somewhat recently, which maybe sounds weird to people, but I live in a house with another creator. Actually, does country music. I'm in Nashville, for those that don't know, and just country music. So we do different things. But this house is it's got a beautiful backyard. It's got lots of trees and stuff. And there's a lot of times where if I'm getting a lot of negative comments or I'm just too wrapped up in the social media thing, I'll literally go outside, sit outside for a moment and just tell myself like, this is real life. These trees are real. It sounds really strange, but I'm only saying this because I don't know how many people are creating content on here, but I'll go out and just look at trees and everything's not moving super fast, so I'll just literally tell myself like, this is real life. These birds up, like this is real, not, the ups and downs of social media. And that'll really help just kind of calm my mind down, because you can kind of get wrapped up in this like fake reality sometimes of just the online world. Even if you're just consuming content, you can just get angry about things that aren't even affecting you. And if you just go outside, take a walk literally, or go for a run, and you just remind yourself like, okay, this is real life. No one out here is like wondering what you're doing in your videos. So that really helps me out.
It sounds like you have like a really good mindfulness practice of like, I'm just going to go be present in the moment.
Yeah, I've tried to meditate before. I just, I need to like go outside, or I'll go, on a hike, or I'll go like fishing with a friend. I'm not really a big fisherman. I don't know. I don't, but if I go like fly fishing or something, just something where you're physically active, you're with someone who's not asking you about your videos or anything. You're just outside, and where everything's moving at the natural pace it's supposed to move at. That really just calms me down.
It's so hard to get the mind to shut off. I know in the morning, like I go for a walk, I try to, like yourself, incorporate as much meditation as I can. It's so hard. Like I'm going out on a walk trying to like keep my mind nice and calm. And I like 3 miles this morning, and I just want my brain to shut up for just a moment. However, like all the tasks of the days keep creeping in, ideas that come to mind. We've been an entrepreneur since 2015. Never thought it was a route that I was going to go, and I still have yet to figure out how to kind of balance our business with our content creation. And I know that you also have a business, Zouvier. What is that? And then do you have like a strategic ambition with that? And if so, how do you balance your content creation, your strategic vision, and then the other aspects of life?
Yeah. So Zouvier, which was kind of born in Alaska, it's a made up word, Zuvier. We thought it was, my friend and I, when we came up with it, thought it was funny that it just looked like an expensive French luxury brand. And it was kind of born out of taking pictures and kind of absurd, like almost GQ style photo shoots just for fun. Out of Glacier or something like that. We were wearing sunglasses, and I just thought like, whatever this lifestyle is, I want to do this as a business. And I thought, well, if the clothing was the main kind of aspect to making that work, I thought, well, I could make clothing that fits this. And in the first year, I launched almost 2 years ago now, but the first year I made almost no progress because I try to connect it to the military, because I had this social media thing blowing up at the same time. And I thought, well, I don't want to do two different things. That might take too much time. So I try to combine Zouvier to make it a veteran brand. That wasn't really authentic, because then the veteran audience was confused by, like, they just saw this traveling stuff, swimwear. They were kind of confused by like, why is this a veteran brand? And then I kind of fell into a slump for a while where I was like, well, what am I doing with the military videos if they're not going to help with this clothing brand? Now I have two things that aren't working. And I finally, around last year, November of last year, really separated the two and said, okay, Zouvier is something separate. I have these comedy videos. That was a struggle because, like, your question asks how you balance two different things. And I found that it's actually really nice to have two things that aren't related to each other now at all, because if one thing isn't doing very well, I can just jump over to this other world where nobody cares about the comedy videos. And then if that's not doing well for a day, it's like, well, I'm not defined by this. I can go and make some funny videos. So keeping that balance, actually, which I thought, yeah, all the business advice says do one thing and do it really well. That's generally the advice I see. But it's like, well, I have two things that I'm passionate about. And actually, it's nice that I don't feel like I'm defined by one thing, you know? So I will spend kind of maybe 50-50 right now with my time, where I just have to sit down on 2 to 3 days and say, okay, these days I'm going to grind out a bunch of videos. Grind is maybe not the right word. I enjoy making them, but I'll make the videos these days, kind of release them throughout the week, and then I'll focus on the clothing, marketing the other days. And it's actually really nice, because if I'm feeling overwhelmed, like I said, I can just hop over to this other world where nobody cares about the other thing. So it's actually really nice.
It sounds like you've stepped into the world that a lot of us like to step into, is like that serial entrepreneurial thing, because we begin to recognize that like it takes time for businesses to grow. And if we don't have enough funding to fully staff one venture for multiple years, which a lot of small businesses don't, we have to kind of diversify our efforts, and marrying them up can, like you had said, like we have to be able to niche down what it is that we're doing to the specific audiences that it speaks to. Because yes, there's a group of traveling veterans, but they may not be into the clothing brand in the way that you think about. And veterans do love veteran-centric comedy. I mean, that's why they created Vet TV with all these comedy shows that are now on it. Like they're just collecting as much content as they can, because there's such an audience for that. But again, it's going to take time to continue to grow that to a profitable business. How do you keep yourself productive in these ventures? Because there's a lot of people out there building multiple businesses. Do you have any productivity tips on how you stay motivated and focused on these goals?
Yeah, I definitely suffer from this a lot, where I will sit on an idea for far too long, or I'll just procrastinate in the sense that I just won't take action. And that's really, I think, more importantly, I've learned business school, unfortunately, wasn't too helpful in terms of creating your own business, because nobody teaching us really, for the most part, had created something on their own, or maybe they wouldn't be at teaching at business school. And that's not a knock at business school. I just think what I was doing was very outside of what they were used to dealing with. And I found that more importantly than any business plan or video hack, or how to make your video go viral, you'll kind of learn those things as you go. The biggest thing is just doing the thing, whether that's for clothing, that's making content to promote it, or with the comedy video, it's making a video. I found that if I just lower the bar for what I consider to be good sometimes, which is really goes against the military mindset, which is like you either do it or you don't. Instead, I kind of allow myself to fail a little bit publicly. So if I'm sitting on, say, 3 video ideas, I'm not sure if they're that funny, they're that good. I find that it's a lot more helpful actually to just post them. Maybe they're not the best, but then after posting them, I'll suddenly get the 4th idea, which I'm like, oh wait, this is actually really funny. And then I'll make that and it'll hit. But I never would have figured that out if I just sat on those, trying to refine those 3 video ideas. So productivity wise, if I'm just caught up in an idea, I'll just force myself to post it, even if I don't think it was the best one, which goes against, again, a lot of the military mindset of just be the best or don't do it at all kind of thing, or sports. And I find that doesn't work for me personally very well. I think I have to kind of just do something, and that'll cause me to be more productive than to sit on ideas for too long.
Yeah, that permission to fail, I love that. The fact that you've now given yourself permission to score a certain grade that isn't perfection.
Yeah, normally an F most of the time. This is only like the past 3 months, I would say I've really found, especially my clothing brand, where a lot of my friends follow that, and clothing brand is, it's not something for everybody. Like, if you happen to drop the site or whatever later in the video, like some people check it out and be like, doesn't, it's not for me. I don't want to look like that. And when a lot of my friends see that, that'll be in the back of my mind, even if they're not hating on me. It's like, oh, they're going to see me put out this cringy video. And I'll literally just, only recently where I was like, finally gave, like you said, my permission for myself to be like, screw it. Like, never going to get here or, further if I don't just put out some fit Fs.
Yeah. It's what's pretty wild. Like when you talk about, oh my gosh, my friends, my family are going to see this. They're going to judge me. But they're also way more customers, way more potential audience out there that will receive it. But if we're not putting it out because we're afraid of what our friends and family are going to think, like that's such a small portion of our audience. I mean, my wife and I have been discussing our own transition with 1 Mile, One Veteran because it had started with our closest support being very supportive and speaking very good things and providing us critical feedback. However, we know that we have people that we can't reach because we're not putting out the type of content that they would be receptive to. We're constantly building our business around the audience that we do have, which is great, but our audience is still relatively small and relatively close knit that we speak with. And it's been effective, and we're having trouble giving ourselves permission to fail that we might think would garner some criticism from those closest to us. Do you have any advice for people like us that kind of lack that personal empathy? Because like perfection is what we shoot for 100% of the time.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with, you'll see it on comments on say YouTube or something, the common, or if someone's following a music artist, because my roommate, as I mentioned, is country music. People will always say quality over quantity. It's a nice thing to repeat. It sounds nice. But I don't think sometimes you don't know what is quality until you put out, a lot of quantity, man, it doesn't sound as cool. Whatever, that phrasing doesn't sound very cool, but everyone goes through this. Even the famous athlete, for example, you don't see them miss in practice. No one's watching them, like Derek Jeter missing a swing in when he was practicing. I'm sure he failed a lot just privately. It's just harder when your failures are public. And there's kind of two things actually that I ask myself, not that I ever really do this, but I'll just remind myself of these two questions, because if I get hate, even after these two questions I ask myself, I'm like, well, that's just on them. And the two questions I ask myself are, am I like tearing someone else down in my content? And I'll preface this by saying I do make fun of things about groups of people sometimes, but I don't think I ever do it in a way that's really going after them. I'll never go after a specific person. I'll never go after a company. The veteran community will do this a lot of times. We'll go after a specific person. I'm not about that. I don't find it very creative. Doesn't make me a better person. Not that I'm an amazing person, but it's not, I don't get better at being funny by tearing someone else down. So that's the first thing. Am I like tearing down a creator or business or like a very specific thing? And then the second thing I asked myself was I misrepresenting myself in some way? Am I basically pretending to be someone I'm not in this video? And if I'm not doing either of those things and people are still don't like it, then, that sucks for them. But to me, those are the two things if I was doing those two things, if I was tearing people down, pretending to be someone I'm not, then it feels somewhat fair if people are hating on it. Sure. But if I'm not doing those things and someone just thinks it's cringe, then, that's not hurting anybody. So I kind of keep those two rules in mind. And that really helps if a video doesn't do well, or I do get a negative comment, hey, this wasn't funny, I didn't hurt anybody. So that's kind of what I tell myself.
That's cool that you have like an internal or a routine integrity check essentially about the content that you're putting out. And the path of success isn't necessarily whether or not it performed well, because we learn from everything that we do put out. Like the algorithm gives us information. However, the success of the content is this something that helped propel me forward and didn't do harm to another, is kind of what I'm hearing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not like I am confused, about whether my content is uh, doing that. It's not like I'm always, I'm about to misrepresent myself, but it's just, I just remind myself of those two things. Because if people are still hating on me after that, that's just haters, haters going to hate kind of thing. And, I have a friend, actually, this really helped. Two other things kind of helped. One, I saw a creator on TikTok who, I can't remember his name exactly, but he will literally cut wood, like he'll chop wood in his backyard. Good looking guy who chop wood like shirtless, right? It's the type of thing that if I did, I'd probably be roasted by my friends. And, he's not doing anything to anybody. And he was replying to a comment one time that said, like, you're really cringe. And he said, well, everything is cringe to somebody, he said, even posting on TikTok itself, there's a group of people that think that's fundamentally a cringy thing to do, even being on the platform. So you're not going to please everybody. And then I have a friend from high school, not really a close friend, but we went to, we grew up in the same town together, and he's an airline pilot now. And he posts social media content about his airline life, just really wholesome. Just here's me flying from, wherever, San Francisco to Tokyo, and he gets hate comments. So I saw that and I was like, people are hating on him like for doing nothing. Then there's just always going to be a small group of people that don't like what you're doing, and you can waste too much time trying to appeal to those people and not move forward.
Yes, exactly. There's always going to be the haters. There's always going to be the people that love, and those aren't really our true target audience. Our target audience are the people that would love us if they knew that we were out there. And one, please share your TikTok handle, and then two, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you kind of a current relevant question as it pertains specifically to your veteran and military audience and TikTok, because TikTok is currently not allowed within the DoD. Like, soldiers are not allowed to represent themselves in an official capacity on TikTok. There are no official DoD TikTok accounts, and Congress is currently working on a way to bring TikTok into a safer realm for America because of adversarial work. So one, what's your TikTok account name for our audience to know? And two, how are you navigating that space with your audience?
So TikTok handle is Sunny, SUNNY_actual, Sunny Actual. It's a military-esque name. All the other Sunnies were taken when I was trying to change my name, and I got kind of annoyed. And I just gotten out of the military, where since I was a platoon leader, and you have like a radio operator with you, who my radio operator was amazing. Snow, if you're listening to this. But when you get on the radio, you say, this is the actual, and so I made it Sunny Actual. In terms of the DoD thing, yeah, it's weird because I can't really hate on, I got my biggest success overnight on TikTok. Now I'm bigger on, or not bigger on Instagram, but also have a big following on Instagram, which is nice. And my YouTube is starting to grow. But yeah, I've seen it in the news. I grew on there, so it's hard for me to kind of, hate on the app. It's an app that out of any other platform can get you discovered overnight the fastest. I don't know where we'll see it going. I don't discuss too many. I try to stay away from really strong political issues on my platform because I want to keep it, lighthearted and just fun. I don't want people to like be angry or, at the world. Like, I want people to come to the channel, at least with the comedy stuff and even the travel stuff, like just be inspired, go to a different place in your mind. So I stay away from a lot of that. I guess we'll see what happens. If it does get banned, I'll have to figure out something new. If it does get brought into the US, maybe nothing will change. We'll see. I definitely stay away from those topics. I myself don't understand the full scope of some of these things, and I don't want to die on a hill that I don't even understand myself. So
no, that's absolutely the right approach to take. I mean, that's how I feel about 90% of the political stuff. Is it's beyond my comprehension, because I focus on creating content that will help people in their mental health space. Like, that's where, my background in medicine comes into play. That's where my creative work comes into play. That's where my degree in the Bible comes into play. Is like, we're here to be helpful. We're here to point people towards good resources. And for us, like, we've found and heard that TikTok is such a supportive community in the mental health space that I do hope that creators can continue to share positive stuff, because when we bring that same content to different avenues, and especially within the veteran space, we've walked into some just very toxic realms on things that we thought were going to be helpful, right? Like, and TikTok just hasn't hit that toxic place for us.
Yeah, I would agree. I think TikTok's a lot less of a personal app as it's used right now, just because most people, for those that aren't on TikTok, there's what's called a For You page. So, you're just kind of mindlessly scrolling on there, as it's called, where you just, you go to the next video. But because of that, it's not as personal, if that makes sense. So it's not like Instagram, where people feel like they're more like your friends, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but that tends to get more of I find that the community on Instagram can be a lot more toxic than TikTok. And that just could be because on TikTok, you're not really spending that much time on any person's channel. You're kind of just going through your, whatever the algorithm curates for you. It could just be that the people on TikTok are nicer. I don't know. I've gotten mean comments everywhere, but I think a lot of it's just the impersonal nature of TikTok.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, professionally, you're growing, and you'll continue to grow as the years move on, as you find ways forward through your content creation, as well as your other business ventures that you're working on. And I love what you've said about your mindset. In what ways do you seek to improve yourself each day, and how do you measure your own personal growth and progress?
Yeah, that's something I still figuring out. I can definitely be pretty hard on myself, where, I'll have a month where I'll do really well. And then I'll have several months sometimes where I'm not doing very well. I'm not even trying, which is a really tough part, trying to figure out like why I'm not even trying. I think in terms of self-improvement, I just focus on my input a lot more. That's helped with these platforms, and anything that you're putting out, you can be very easy to get caught up in the output, because that's ultimately the thing that you want. If you're selling something, you can't lie to yourself and say, well, it doesn't matter if no one buys it. That is what you're trying to do. But sometimes you don't have too much control over that. So the more I can just tell myself, okay, did I do things to improve my videos this week more than I did last week? And that's only really a recent thing where I've started to get in that mindset more, because otherwise you can, really go down a spiral of, well, I'm making videos, they're not working, nobody likes me, I'm gonna die alone, and you just go down these. So yeah, improvement in terms of just focusing on the things I can control helps a lot, and it's easier said than done, but that's helped a lot. Where, okay, did I improve something on the editing this week that I didn't do last week? Was I a little bit more intentional about this part of the video than I was last week? Did I have a slightly better process for, I don't know, setting up my shot this week? Whatever it is, I try to focus on that more than each individual video being a hit, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And, some of the things that we know about comedy is, one, it's a great escape when we find a good comedian that we can listen to, but it also is a great way to help our mental health. It helps us wrestle through complex issues in a way that is no longer intimidating. It helps us relate to others within our community because of shared experiences and shared observations. And I feel like your comedy has helped a lot of military members and veterans going through similar things that you've experienced kind of cope with their reality and go forward. A lot of people will say like, oh, our entertainment is so distracting. And it's just like, not when you consider it as an artistic adventure, because our art is meant to not only inspire, but also change the way we think about things. And your comedy does that. And our service members, our veterans, our first responders, they need people like you, because there is an ongoing mental health crisis that is leading to too many deaths every single day. Do you have a message of hope that you could bring to those that are currently battling?
Well, I appreciate all that you just said. It was very nice. I got this question before this interview, and I was really struggling to think of a good answer because I don't feel like I have it figured out myself all the time, and there can definitely be two extremes in the advice you hear, especially the world I came from, like infantry, which is kind of this stereotypical macho man kind of background, where the advice that you generally hear is either, it's all going to be okay, man, like it's all good. And for some reason that doesn't always make you feel better. And then at the other extreme is, you're super extreme, like just get over it, your kid died, whatever, move on. That doesn't seem to help either. I would say a lot of my struggles have often been sorry, this is a long-winded way of answering your question, but I just think that if I don't pretend to be a guy who has it figured out, it'll be more helpful. But a lot of the mental hell I think that veterans go through, it's kind of spending too much time either in the past or the future, which are two things that don't exist, you know what I mean, anymore. Or the past doesn't exist anymore, it had happened, or the future, which hasn't happened yet. And, I have a lot of people from my battalion that took their own life, that had a wife, kids. I mean, you wouldn't be able to tell on paper that anything was wrong. But I think if you can find a community of people, and that's a hard thing, I think the biggest help for me and what I've observed is forcing yourself to find, because if you just sit in your room and drink and, you're just going to spiral. If you can find a group of people or a hobby or a passion that, takes you out of your own head, basically, and forces you to be present, whether that's fishing, whether that's, I don't know, painting. I know some hardcore guys that paint, you wouldn't expect that. But in terms of hope, I mean, I know people that have gone through some horrific, either combat deployments, they've had a horrific childhood, all those things just compound, and they just decided that they weren't going to let those stories define them anymore. And I think, it's never as bad, I think, as your mind can create. Like your mind can create a lot worse scenarios than are really exist. So if you can do whatever you can to find something that takes you out of that, that would be what I would say, which is not a easy answer. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend I know everyone's situation and just say, oh, it's going to be better, man. So hopefully that's some sort of help or perspective.
It absolutely is. I mean, I love what you said about the past no longer exists and the future is yet to come. Essentially, those things that we worry about no longer exist. They're not there. It's all in our head. And to be able to get a reprieve from that is so necessary. And the fact that you took it from an approach of, we don't have all the answers, but I'm not going to sit there and judge somebody's personal experience, their life, because so many veterans that on the outside look like they already have it all together. They look like they have life figured out, when the reality is we're all struggling in one way or another, whether it's trying to find the next career, whether it's trying to find a new purpose in life, whether it's trying to get over past traumas. We're all working on the same road. And I think it's just important to keep that conversation going and letting people know, hey, I don't have all the answers, but if you need an escape, if for a moment from your life, reach out to me. Don't reach out to the bottle.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of veterans, I think, and this could go for first responders as well, I don't know that world quite as well, but there can be a trauma. This is maybe more a niche topic, but there can be a trauma comparison with a lot of people. And the deployment I was on was very mild. We took some indirect fire. This wasn't 2010 Afghanistan. This, I deployed 19 to 20. There's some IEDs in the AO, but there wasn't crazy firefights, and we still had 4 or 5 people take their own life within a few years after. So I think a huge problem sometimes in the veteran community, or this could really go for any community, is the comparison of, well, my childhood was like this, I was in this combat deployment, and everyone's experience is valid. And if you try to compare why you're feeling depressed when your life wasn't, maybe it doesn't sound as difficult as someone else's, you'll go into like a death spiral in your mind, and it's a dead end to think that way.
Absolutely. That's a great observation, and just a great bit of advice is that there's no need in thinking that way. It's all relative to our experiences. Now, one more time, please tell me, where can people find your content? I know you already mentioned your TikTok, Sunny Actual, but where else can people connect with you?
Yep. So TikTok is Sunny Actual, Instagram Sunny Actual, YouTube, I think it's The Real Sunny. I'm trying to slowly moving away from military content. So that's The Real Sunny. And then my clothing site for anyone that's interested. It may not be your style, but it's Zuvier Lifestyle, ZUVIER lifestyle.com. Check it out. Buy something if you're interested. If not, totally cool. But you can find all my links on any of the Sunny Actual sites.
Sunny, I really appreciate your time here on the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, remember, you can also catch the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast on Reese Across America Radio, ready for you on platforms like iHeartRadio, Odyssey, and the TuneIn app.